The papers were signed at 10:17 on a bright Tuesday morning, and by 10:24 my wife was already discussing where I should leave the house keys. I remember that because I kept staring at the digital clock above the receptionist's desk, wondering how 11 years of marriage could end between 2 appointments and a tray of stale coffee. I picked up my suitcase, walked out without arguing, and decided I would never ask Mara for another thing. 7 minutes later, a black limousine stopped beside me. If you believe in kindness and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. My name is Everett Hale. At the time, I was 39 years old and worked as a facility supervisor at a private rehabilitation hospital outside Pasadena. It was not glamorous work. I knew which boiler made a knocking sound before rain, which elevator needed a firm push on the third floor button, and which night nurse hid emergency chocolate in the linen room. I earned enough to pay bills if nothing expensive broke. Unfortunately, something expensive was always breaking. My wife, Mara, was different from me in almost every way. She liked schedules, clean countertops, expensive candles, and knowing what came next. She worked in corporate event planning and could organize a dinner for 400 people without forgetting a single place card. When we first met, I loved that certainty in her. She said she loved that I could fix anything with patience and a screwdriver. For a while, that was true. Then my father got sick. He lived alone in a small house near Bakersfield, the same house where I had grown up. After a mild stroke, he could still walk and make coffee, but he forgot things. Once he left a pan burning on the stove. Another time he drove 20 miles and could not remember why. I started visiting every weekend. Friday after work, I would throw clothes into a duffel bag, buy gas I could barely afford, and drive north through traffic. Sunday night, I came home exhausted. Mara tried to be understanding at first. She really did. She packed sandwiches for me. She ordered my father one of those pill organizers with alarms. But months became years, and our marriage began to feel like a waiting room. We stopped taking trips. We postponed replacing the leaking patio door. I missed her company dinner because my father fell in the bathroom. She spent our 10th anniversary alone because I was sitting in an emergency room under fluorescent lights, charging my phone from a loose wall socket. There was no affair. No secret betrayal. Nothing dramatic enough to make one person clearly guilty. We simply became two tired people keeping separate lists of disappointments. The final break came over money. My father needed part-time home care, and I had been paying for more of it than Mara knew. I told myself I was protecting her from worry. That was a lie, though not a cruel one. I was ashamed. I had used part of our emergency savings and planned to replace it with overtime. Then the hospital cut overtime. Mara found the bank statement on a Thursday night. She stood at the kitchen island in her gray work dress, holding 3 pages of numbers. I had just come home carrying a bag of groceries, including the wrong kind of yogurt because I was distracted. "You should have told me," she said. She was right. I apologized. Then I explained too much. Then she reminded me of every time I had said things were under control. I reminded her of every time she had treated my father like an inconvenience. She said that was unfair. I said something about her caring more about appearances than people. That was unfair, too. By midnight, the groceries were still on the counter. 2 weeks later, she asked for a divorce. The process took months because ordinary endings require paperwork. There were forms, emails, passwords, insurance questions, and one absurd argument over a red coffee grinder neither of us actually wanted. Mara kept the house because her mother had helped with the original down payment. I kept my truck, my tools, and a debt that seemed to grow whenever I looked at it. The morning we signed the final papers, Mara's attorney had arranged a conference room in a converted hotel near downtown Los Angeles. Marble entrance. Tall columns. Valet parking. The kind of place where even the water came in glass bottles. Mara arrived with her older sister, Corinne, and 2 people from her office because she had a client meeting afterward. I came alone. That is why the scene outside probably looked harsher than it was. Mara stood on the steps in a white dress surrounded by people in clean business clothes. I had on a black sweater and old trousers. My suitcase was with me because I had spent the previous night in a cheap motel after giving Mara the last set of house keys. When the meeting ended, she followed me outside. She looked tired but composed. Mara was always good at holding herself together when other people were watching. I could tell she expected me to say something. Maybe I should have. Maybe I should have thanked her for the good years. Maybe I should have apologized once more. Maybe I should have told her that despite everything, I did not hate her. But I had spent months explaining myself badly. So I took the handle of my suitcase and walked away. Behind me, I heard Corinne whisper something. A car door closed. Someone's heels clicked across the stone. I kept going. At the edge of the circular driveway, the wheel of my suitcase caught in a crack. The bag tipped over. My shirt spilled halfway out because the zipper had been broken for 3 weeks and I had tied it with a shoelace. That was the lowest point, strangely enough. Not the divorce papers. Not losing the house. Standing beside a decorative fountain, stuffing 2 wrinkled work shirts back into a cheap suitcase while people walked around me. Then the limousine arrived. It was long, black, polished enough to reflect the palm trees. It moved slowly through the driveway and stopped beside me. I assumed I was in the way. A driver in a dark suit stepped out and opened the rear door. Then he looked directly at me. Mr. Hale. I froze with one hand still on my suitcase. Behind me, the conversation on the step stopped. I knew how ridiculous the moment looked. I also knew I had no idea what was happening. A woman stepped from the limousine. Her name was Odette Voss. Most people in Southern California knew the name because Voss Medical System supplied rehabilitation equipment to hospitals across the country. Newspapers called her a billionaire, though I had never met anyone who used that word about themselves. She was in her late 60s, short, silver-haired, and walked with a cane she seemed slightly annoyed to need. I had met her once before. 8 months earlier. And that meeting had lasted less than 15 minutes. It happened at my hospital during a winter storm. A private donor tour had been scheduled that afternoon, but heavy rain flooded part of the lower parking area. I was in the basement dealing with a drain when I found an older woman sitting on a folding chair near the service corridor. Her coat was wet. Her driver had gone to move the car. She looked pale. I asked if she needed a nurse. She said no. I brought her a dry towel anyway and made tea in the maintenance office using a dented electric kettle. The only clean mug I had said world's okayest boss. She laughed at it. We talked for a few minutes. I did not know who she was. She asked why I had a stack of caregiver brochures on my desk, and I mentioned my father. Before she left, she noticed a broken transfer lift waiting for repair. I complained that the manufacturer had discontinued one small plastic component, which meant the hospital was being pushed to replace a machine worth thousands of dollars. I had spent evenings making a safer replacement design. She asked to see it. I showed her a rough drawing covered with coffee stains. That was all. Weeks later, someone from Voss Medical called the hospital. They wanted permission to review my design. I assumed nothing would happen. Then my father got worse. The divorce began. I stopped checking my personal email regularly. Now Odette Voss was standing beside a limousine while my former wife watched. From the steps. She did not announce that I was secretly rich. I was not. She did not hand me a suitcase of money. She looked at my broken luggage and said, "I've been trying to reach you for 3 weeks." I felt embarrassed more than excited. Odette explained that her engineering team had tested my modification. It reduced strain on a commonly failing part and could extend the life of older rehabilitation lifts. It was not revolutionary. It would not transform medicine. But it was useful. Useful mattered. Her company wanted to license the design and hire me as a field systems consultant, someone who understood what equipment looked like after years in real hospitals, not just on computer screens. I thought there had been a mistake. There had not. The limousine was there because Odette had a meeting at the same hotel. Her assistant had recognized my name on the building's visitor schedule after weeks of failed calls. It was coincidence mixed with persistence, nothing magical. She offered me a ride to their office. I looked back once. Mara was still standing on the steps. Her expression was not jealousy. That would make the story simpler than life really is. She looked confused. Then hurt. And I understood why. For years, she had believed I was disappearing into problems that would never end. My father, the hospital, broken machines, extra shifts. I had believed she had stopped seeing value in me. Maybe we had both been partly wrong. I put my suitcase in the trunk and got into the limousine. The inside smelled faintly of leather and peppermint. There were bottles of sparkling water indoor. I remember that detail because my hands were shaking so badly I could not open one. Odette noticed but did not comment. The job offer did not solve my life overnight. That part matters. I still owed money. My father still needed care. I still woke up some mornings reaching toward the empty side of the bed. The licensing agreement took 4 months to finalize. Lawyers changed sentences I did not understand. My first weeks as a consultant were uncomfortable because I owned one decent jacket and hated speaking in conference rooms. I made mistakes. During my second presentation, I called a senior executive by the wrong name. On my first field trip, I left my laptop charger in Sacramento and had to borrow one from a receptionist. I discovered that being noticed for good work creates new pressure, not instant peace. But the salary helped. More importantly, the schedule helped. Voss Medical allowed me to work remotely. 2 days a week. I found a small apartment near my father's town and arranged reliable home care without hiding the cost from anyone. For the first time in years, I stopped pretending I could carry everything alone. 3 months after the limousine ride, Mara emailed me. The subject line said, "Coffee grinder." I laughed when I saw it. She had found the red grinder in a moving box and wanted to know if I wanted it. We met at a quiet cafe on a Sunday afternoon. There was no reunion. No sudden kiss. No speech about destiny. Mara had cut her hair shorter. I had lost weight. We looked familiar to each other and somehow older. She asked about my father. I asked about her work. We talked carefully at first. Then she apologized for something I had never expected. She said she had spent years believing that if she organized life perfectly, nothing bad could reach us. My father's illness frightened her because it could not be scheduled or solved. I apologized, too. I told her that helping people had become an excuse for shutting her out. I had made decisions alone and called it sacrifice. We sat there for almost 2 hours. When we left, she gave me the coffee grinder. That was it. And strangely, it was enough. A year later, my father died on a cool November morning with the radio playing softly beside his bed. His last months were not easy, but they were peaceful. I was there more often. I learned to cook the terrible oatmeal he liked. I stopped correcting him when he confused Tuesday with Thursday. At his funeral, Mara came alone. She stood near the back. Afterward, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was an old photograph of my father fixing a bicycle in our garage. She had found it in a drawer at the house. That simple act stayed with me longer than the limousine. Today, I still work with rehabilitation systems. I am not a billionaire. I never became famous. My design earned enough to clear my debts and create a modest savings account, but mostly it gave me work I was proud of. Odette once told me that companies often overlook people who understand problems because those people are too busy fixing them to prepare impressive presentations. I think about that often. I also think about Mara. We did not remarry. But over time, we became something gentler than enemies. We exchanged birthday messages. Once a year, usually in December, we meet for coffee. The red grinder sits in my kitchen now, still making an awful noise every morning. Sometimes people ask me about the day the billionaire's limousine pulled up. After my divorce. They expect me to describe revenge. They want Mara to regret everything. They want me to become rich enough to make everyone who doubted me feel small. But that is not what happened. The limousine did not prove that I was better than my wife. It simply arrived at a moment when I had almost forgotten that one small piece of work, done carefully and without applause, could still matter to someone. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like and share it with someone who still believes kindness matters. Comment: kindness still exists if you believe even one good act can change someone's life. I used to think kindness meant giving until you had nothing left. I was wrong about that. Sometimes kindness is telling the truth before silence becomes distance. Sometimes it is accepting help without feeling ashamed. Sometimes it is returning an old photograph to a man you no longer live with because you know he will need it. And sometimes a good act disappears from your memory while it keeps traveling through someone else's life. The quiet lesson I carried from that Tuesday morning was simple. Losing one future does not mean your life has ended. It may only mean you have reached the place where you finally learn to live without pretending, to forgive without returning, and to notice that even after goodbye, there can still be a road ahead.